And good morning. As always, glad to have Pat McGuigan with us. And Pat, we've already talked a couple of times this year about the pension problem in Oklahoma, and we need to talk about it again because we're looking at this more than $16 billion unfunded liability, and a figure you gave me showed that each taxpayer's share is more than close to $14,000. I mean, are we going to get pension reform this year?
I think we will, and the 14,000 figure is from one group. Other groups come in lower than that. That's the Institute for Truth in Accounting, and they're a little bit gloomy and dour in their analysis, and we're probably in the kind of times that that's a good idea. So I kind of hang my hat on that. But even if you come in with different figures, things are glum. There is a strong case to be made for reform, and it got strengthened in recent weeks. The Moody Investors Service did an analysis where traditionally they took only net tax-supported debt as their benchmark. They now have added pensions into their analysis, and in doing so they moved Oklahoma from one of the dozen or 15 best in terms of debt to one of the dozen or 15 worse, solely driven by the pension debt. So this is not Pat McGuigan, it's not the Institute for Truth in Accounting, it's Moody's Investor Service, which is a mainstream, very respected group. I've been studying, I had a little bit of fun. There's not much fun here, but I had a little bit of fun by calling the story Moody's Blue, referring to their color as well as the names of some of the people involved. Now, just to sum up, net tax-supported debt is only 1.4%. So that's why our bond rating's been good. You add this in, and it drives it up. Pensions alone are 8.6% of gross domestic product for Oklahoma. The two combined, you get right at 10%. Right at 10%. The national average is 6.5%. I don't know how else to paint a rather stark and somewhat alarming picture than with somebody else's figures. Now, there's some analyses that put that roughly 10% even higher, closer to 14.5, 15%, and that's a little bit at the dour end of things. So what's to be done? It seems to me that some of the proposals being discussed at the legislature are at least a first step. I think we said one other time that the 80% benchmark in terms of adequacy of funding, right. Oklahoma on the average is at 61%, with the teachers the weakest. But if you set that benchmark, it gains you $5 billion of that $16.5 billion. How do you do the rest? One idea is being explored to take the school land money, and there's a couple other proposals, and plug that directly in to direct posits, and then maybe you start to close that gap. But it certainly seems to me, especially with economic growth being real and being there, but not dramatic. This is not, the best economy in American history, that it needs to begin to be addressed at the Capitol, and there needs to be some meeting of the minds among the consumers of the pension funds and the people that pay the bills for the state as a whole, which is the taxpayers. I don't know if there's really a middle ground. I think that it seems like the economic evidence points to the need for reform. I'm not an economist, but I am a historian, and in history you don't ignore evidence like this and get away with it in the long run. You might in the short term.
Is there still talk about possibly moving from a defined benefit to a defined contribution system?
Yes, there's talk of that. And the biggest discussion right now is on the existing pool of workers versus incoming new workers. And there seems to be, I wouldn't say consensus, there seems to be some momentum for the idea that new workers will be treated differently and not have quite the same lucrative benefits that existing employees do. And again, add all these up, and it starts you down the road towards addressing what is a really serious challenge. We're a relatively poor state. We've had some good years, we've had some bad years, but if you begin to address it now, you might be able to work your way out of it. The only caveat on that is that national picture, because to some extent, like every state in the country, we're tied in with the national economy, and we can't control all those factors.
Might be, for the person who has to deal with this challenge, enough to make you want to drink, drive you to drink. As long as you're not trying to drink strong beer or wine, you're not going to be able to buy that, at least for another year, it looks like, right?
Pretty good transition there.
Thanks.
What we've got is that at the Capitol, there seemed to be momentum early on to make Oklahoma more like some of the other states where you could purchase wine and strong beer in grocery stores. There was a lot of organized opposition from the liquor distribution industry, opposition to that idea, support coming from consumers, from the chamber, and in the long term, it seems to me to be the kind of thing that probably eventually happens in Oklahoma. But I believe what they're grappling with at the legislature, but I should mention interim task force, which sometimes is a death sentence.
Yes.
I don't think that's the case here. I think that there's enough real interest from a wide range of players, for and against and in the middle, that you're going to have some meaningful discussion. We'll see. And it's not impossible that something might come back. But for now, I think that that's the most likely outcome is a long study, and perhaps they'll tackle something next year. The only problem with that rosy scenario about some kind of resolution of this long-standing issue is that that's an election year. And every time you get into an election cycle, ideas of any kind that have political consequences tend to start fading from the scene. But we'll see. Yeah, once in a while when I examine these national pension data studies, I will have a glass of wine along with it to kind of lessen the blow a little bit. It's tough stuff.
You just can't buy it at the grocery store.
Yeah, you can't buy it at the I got to go down to my favorite liquor store.
Read more about these and other topics at CapitolBeatOK.com. Pat, thanks very much. See you next week.